Welcome to another segment in our discussion of the 7 churches.
Thank you.
We have covered long distance. We started with the church of Ephesus.
Yes.
Yes, and Ephesus is the loveless church. And then from Ephesus, we moved to the church of Smyrna, the persecuted church. After Smyrna, we went to Pergamos, and this, the typical feature about is it's a compromising church.
Yes.
And then from Pergamos, we moved to Thyatira. Yes, Thyatira. Yes, and that is the corrupt church.
True.
Then after Thyatira,
Sardis.
we talked about Sardis, the dead church. Yes. But after discussing the dead church, we are now on the church of Philadelphia.
Correct.
And here is the message of God to this little church of Philadelphia. Revelation chapter 3, beginning with verse 7. And I read. And to the angel of the church in Philadelphia write, these things says he who is holy, he who is true, he who has the key of David, he who opens and no one shuts, and shuts and no one opens. I know your works. See, I have set before you an open door, and no one can shut it. For you have a little strength, and have kept my word, and have not denied my name. Indeed, I'll make those of the synagogue of Satan who say they are Jews and are not, but lie. Indeed, I will make them come and worship before your feet, and to know that I have loved you. Because you have kept my command to persevere, I will also keep you from the hour of trial which shall come upon the whole world to test those who dwell on the earth. Behold, I'm coming quickly. Hold fast what you have, that no one may take your crown. He who overcomes, I will make him a pillar in the temple of my God, and he shall go out no more. I will write on him the name of my God, the new Jerusalem, which comes down out of heaven from my God, and I will write on him my new name. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. What a message.
It's quite a profound message indeed.
Yeah.
It's very comforting to get to the church at Philadelphia after having gone through all the other churches that we faced.
Yes, especially after Sardis.
Yes, especially after Sardis. It was a seriously compromising church.
Yes.
But Pastor, as you go through this church, you realize that this is, I think, the best of all the 7 churches that are recorded in the book of Revelation.
Yes.
It is
no
a book,
word of censure.
It has no word of censure.
Yeah.
It is a church that was faithful to Christ, faithful to his word, and faithful to God. It is a church that did not compromise. It is a church that did not backtrack in its faith to God. In fact, as you read through the messages, you meet only commendation coming from God toward this church.
Yes.
Would you have wanted to be a member of this church?
To tell you the truth, I have some mixed feelings about it.
I thought it was supposed to be an obvious response that you would have wanted to be a member of a church that has no compromise recorded of it at all.
Would have been wonderful to belong to a church like Philadelphia.
Okay.
A church where God has no word of censure, but just commendation. But you know, you and me are coming from Laodicea, the church that is very lukewarm.
We are in the last church before Christ comes.
Yes, the lukewarm church of Laodicea. And with our experience, if we were to belong to the church of Philadelphia, if I belong to the church of Philadelphia, I'm just wondering what kind of a message God would have written to this church.
Okay.
Would there be a word or a line that says, nevertheless, I have this against you,
Yes.
that you hold this fellow from Laodicea.
So you feel that if you had been a member of this church, one of the challenges that might have been found is that in this message would have been included a message of the church's tolerance of you.
Yes, I would, my prayer is that we would move out of the state of compromise to the state of Philadelphia, where God has no word of censure. Yes, it would have been wonderful to belong to a church like that. Yes.
It's indeed a great church.
Yes. Now, let me ask you a question.
Okay.
As we went through this Church of Philadelphia, did you notice, and as you have studied it, have you noticed any similarity between the conditions of the Church of Philadelphia and the spiritual condition of the church? You remember when we were talking about Sardis, we discovered that the history of the church and the spiritual condition of the church, somehow there were some similarities.
Yes,
so did you notice any similarities?
Well, one thing I need to put across very clearly is that for all these churches, as John was writing in AD 90, before he put across the message that affected the church, he first spoke to them of conditions that they were aware of.
Yes.
In other words, for all the 7 churches, there is a similarity between the condition of the city and the spiritual state of the church.
Wow.
For example, let's look at this church at Philadelphia.
Yes.
Philadelphia was located just a few miles from Sardis.
Yeah, just 28 miles.
It was really a short distance.
Very short
separating.
distance. You could move very easily from Sardis to Philadelphia.
And just like you could physically move easily from Sardis to Philadelphia, the spiritual connotation of that as well is that it's also very possible to move from the spiritual condition of Sardis to the spiritual condition of Philadelphia.
Wow, profound.
Now, Philadelphia is a city. Scholars have documented that Philadelphia was a city that was prone to a lot of earthquakes. Even Ellen White confirms this in some of her writings.
Yes.
It was a city that was prone to a lot of earthquakes. Time and again, earthquakes would strike the city of Philadelphia. So now the people in Philadelphia, they were always constructing and the buildings being raised down again by earthquakes. So there were people that were living in a city, number one, expecting a trial. There were in a people that were living in this city but expecting to flee or to run out.
Yes.
So as
anytime when earthquakes strike, they would need to run out
of the city.
Yes.
And so as John is writing to them, he's writing from the background of a people that are facing falling walls, that are facing shaking ground, a people that are always ready to carry their bags and run out. Hence, even if you notice in the message that he writes to the church, he gives 2 promises. Number one, he says, talking of what Christ was promising them, he says, I will keep you from the hour of trial that will befall the whole earth. Because these were people that were always afraid of a trying hour as a result of earthquakes. And John also promises them a better city, New Jerusalem, in which they will need not to run out anymore. So he's looking at the spiritual condition of the city, and then he's assuring them that there's a better condition that Christ is promising them. But Pastor, the time period of the church at Philadelphia is from roundabout 1798 up to 1844. But we know, of course, that the conditions or the circumstances, the spiritual circumstances within Philadelphia might have started a few years earlier. For example, one of the things that is known of this church at Philadelphia is a spiritual revival. What could have led to the religious awakening of the church at Philadelphia? I mean, coming from the background that this church is coming from a period of Sardis where the church was literally dead. What could have led to this religious awakening in the church at Philadelphia?
Awakening. One of the greatest revival awakening in the history of the Christian church.
Very correct.
Takes place during this period of Philadelphia. And your question, if I could understand saying what led to this great awakening.
Yes, indeed, because the
Yes.
church at Philadelphia
Had
is
been
a church
there.
of a religious
Yes.
awakening.
Yes.
And what could have
Okay.
led to this religious
To this
awakening?
greater. When we read the history of the Christian church, we know that 1755, for example, there was the great Lisbon earthquake,
Very correct, yes.
which was felt in Africa, it was felt in Asia, it was felt in Europe. The greatest earthquake that it ever struck the world. That
Yeah,
was the
yes.
Lisbon earthquake. So
yes,
it
true.
shook people out of their spiritual indifference.
Okay.
And then after that, a few years later, 1780, there was the dark day. You remember?
Yeah, yes,
when you study the history of the Christian church, there was the dark day in 1780. Now, when that dark day, when the sun rose and somewhere towards midday, suddenly the sun turned black. That could not be explained by science. And people began to study the scriptures, and they saw that this was a sign of the second coming of the Lord. So people began to study the scriptures. People began to be aware of the second coming of Christ, that Christ is soon to come. And so people started now preaching the word of God in 1892. In 1892, William Carey preached this sermon on missions.
Okay.
And started a movement, a missionary movement that went to China to begin to communicate the message of the second coming with people who did not know the Lord.
Okay.
They were willing to sacrifice their lives for the sake of other people. This was a period which was marked by brotherly love.
Yes.
People concerned about the spiritual status of their fellow human being. And then in 1798, there was the papacy came to an end. The reign of the papacy came to an end. Again, it shocked the world because nobody ever thought that a power like the papacy could lose their hold in the world affairs, their dominance in world affairs. So from that period, because of those events, people were now looking forward to the second coming of Jesus. So, by the way, Philadelphia, the Church of Philadelphia, this is one of the only churches where we have this message in verse 11,
Verse 11.
where Christ reminds the church, and he says, "Behold, I am
come
coming quickly.
Yes.
Hold fast to what you have, that no one may take your crown."
So what we are saying here is that certain signs that had been predicted in the Bible of the second coming of Christ had taken place. And so it led to a revival of the
It led
people.
to a great religious awakening.
They were expecting the coming of
They were
Christ now.
expecting the coming of Christ. It led to the Advent awakening.
Okay, yes. True.
So from all over the world, suddenly preachers began to preach about the second coming of Jesus Christ. I mentioned William Carey,
Yes.
who went to China.
Yeah, even during those days, Emmanuel D. Lacunza wrote a very powerful book on the second coming
On
of
the
Christ.
second coming,
Yes.
and then we had Robert Moffat coming to Africa.
During the same
You
days,
remember
yes,
the
Robert
story
Moffat,
of Robert?
yes.
Those people
Charles
were
Hale,
willing
Bartholomew
to
Crute.
sacrifice their
Yes.
lives for the sake of others.
Okay.
Then we have people like David Livingstone.
He's a very popular one in
Yes.
Africa. Yes.
We also have a very interesting another group of missionaries just shortly after this period, who started some mission activities in some far islands in the seas. Okay. But when they pegged all their belongings in coffins.
Okay.
They pegged all their belongings in coffins and sailed into the sea. But the reason why they pegged their belongings in coffins
yes.
is they were making a statement that they are not coming back alive.
And indeed,
They were willing to
many
sacrifice their
of the
lives.
missionaries also during that time,
Yes.
they actually died in foreign lands, including David Livingstone himself.
Yes.
And if you go to Solus University, there's that graveyard for missionaries that died there.
Yes. So this was the period of Philadelphia. Philadelphia means brotherly love. People were willing to sacrifice their lives for the salvation of other people. They took mission very seriously. That's what brought about this great revival. And so God saw this missionary movement of people who were very enthusiastic to preach the word. And he writes them this beautiful letter. Okay. The letter to Philadelphia.
Yes.
Yes. There's also a statement which I may ask you to. Did you notice this on Revelation? It talks about the open door.
Yes. Chapter 3, verse 8.
Yes.
Yes. It
Please
talks
read
about
that.
It says, I know thy works, and behold, I've set before thee an open door that no man can shut.
Yeah.
For thou hast a little strength, and hast kept my word, and hast not denied my name.
Wow. Yes. What is any thoughts that you want to share
On the open door.
this idea of the open door?
I found the open door particularly very striking, especially from the perspective from which it is put across by Ellen White in the book Great Controversy. And she talks about this open door as the open door to mission.
Yes.
The church at Philadelphia was a missionary church.
Yes.
It was a church that woke up as a result of signs, and they were expecting the coming of Christ. But one thing that was good about this church is that they did not want to be saved alone. They were actuated by brotherly love, and they went into foreign lands so that others besides themselves would also be saved. So this open door that is being spoken of here is a door open to missionary activity.
Wow.
But I love the way Great Controversy puts it across. It talks about other doors that only Christ can open and close. Apart from the open door to mission, which only Christ can open and close. Christ is the only one also who can open or close the door to the tomb or to the grave. You know, he's the one who has the keys to death and the grave. He is the one who can only, open the doors of the grave to a resurrection, which means as we believe in Christ, he is also the only one who can resurrect us up by the time of his coming. Not only that, Christ is the only one also who can open the door to the most holy place. He's the one who can open the door to missionary activity, open the door to the grave at the resurrection. He is the only one also who can open the door, to the most holy place. And he's the one who opened the door to the most holy place where he is currently ministering on our behalf. And since Christ is the only one who can open or close doors, he is the one also who is going to close the door of probation. So as he's talking to the church at Philadelphia, he is assuring them that he has the ability to open the door to mission. And if they are to die in foreign lands, he also has the ability or the key to open the door to the grave.
Amen.
While they are ministering, Christ also has the ability to open the door. He's in the most holy place to minister on their behalf. And not only that, he has the ability also to the close of probation. But one thing that I love about how Christ puts it across, because he has the power to close the door of probation, he is also putting across a promise to the church of Philadelphia that he will keep them. And they have an assurance that he will not close them out when probation closes. Now, this is a very interesting church, not only to read about, but also to our spirituality. Discussing the church at Philadelphia, it is a church when they read the signs, they were actuated by brotherly love, and they went about to preach, realizing that it is Christ who has the ability to open and close doors. Now, I wish to talk to someone this afternoon. When they read the signs like the Great Lisbon earthquake, signs like the darkening of the sun, signs like the falling of the stars, or even the end of the Papal era, when they saw all those signs, their response was in going out to preach and reach out to others because they knew that the coming of the Lord must have been near. We have this great sign of the coming of Christ, which is the coronavirus, which has spread right across the world. These signs were predicted of by Christ in the book of Revelation. Has this moved you into a missionary spirit? Has this actuated your brotherly love to want to go out and speak to others? I want to encourage you, brethren. Time is time no more. Signs have happened and they have been fulfilled. And one of the greatest signs that is laid on our doorsteps is the sign of